All right, welcome to the Lowly Shepherd Podcast. I'm your host, Pastor Jay, and with me once again is our guest speaker, Travis, although I guess we could probably promote you and upgrade you from guest and just call you co-host now,
yeah,
right?
You're desperate. You're desperate.
Yeah,
we just look good together.
We do.
Right? I'm here to make you feel. I'm here to make you look good.
He does. He does make me look good all the time. And so, but no, he's here with me again, my compatriot, my co-pilot over here, and so we're happy to have him with us again, and talking about the top 10 challenges facing pastors today. And so I kind of put this list together, and I was going to do it with Kyle, Pastor Kyle out of New Point Church, but he had some emergencies that came up this week, and so I'm just going to do my list, and maybe I'll get with him and do something another time. But I just want to talk about the top 10 challenges facing pastors today, and I'm going to start off with number 10, an issue that we've been dealing with for a year and a half plus now, and that's COVID restrictions. And the reason why it's an issue to me as a pastor is especially things like hospital visits are really a hassle now. If you can get in at all. A lot of hospitals, won't let you in if you're not family, won't let you in, and only let one in at a time. And it really is a hindrance to get in there and try to minister to those that are in the hospital, and then not just the hospitals, but you've got the elderly and the homebound and whatnot. So you've got to be real careful about what you're doing there. And so it really, I don't know. I had a really good visitation schedule going before all this mess hit, and now it feels like I don't get to hardly visit at all. And I'm just now starting to get back into doing some visiting with people because we've got the vaccine going out and stuff. And so maybe this one's kind of going away now, but I know for the last year it's really been kind of a hassle about connect. And some of these are going to kind of connect with one another, but this kind of connects with another one later on the list about trying to stay engaged with people in the church. That was kind of the biggest problem during the COVID stuff. And I know our church didn't shut down for very long. I know churches that were shut down, just online only for like a year plus. Mm-hmm. In fact, we have some here in our town, like the Methodist Church, and I think Church of Christ just opened back up maybe. But I mean, they just opened up like a few months ago. So I mean, they were down for a full year. We only shut down physical meetings for, I think it was about 2 months. It was like from the middle of March to the middle of May, and then by June we were back up and running all services. And so and then I think we've shut down a couple of times when we had several members. We had a couple of deacons, myself and the youth minister at the same time had COVID, and so we shut down for 1 week, to kind of get over that mess. But we actually made a pledge as a church back at the beginning of the year that we weren't going to shut down anymore for whatever reason. It's just, if we got 5 people here, we got 5 people here, and we'll just go on. And so that has worked so far since we've done that. And we'll have some weeks where we have a lot of people, and we'll have some weeks where we have very few people, and it just, we keep going. But with all the online stuff now, it just that'll connect into something later too. But I don't know, that's just been sort of a hassle that's been.
Well, I think that's a good approach to take to something like that. Just leave it up to the individual whether they're going to come to church or not. Good thing about it is that these restrictions are all starting to lessen. You can get into the hospitals and things like that more easily. I know there was a time I tried to make a hospital visit and I was turned away. But then again, that was here locally. Then I went to Stillwater, and dang if they didn't let me in.
Yeah, see, the one time I went to Stillwater, they wouldn't let me in. That's funny.
Yeah, and so
I should have called first. I drove all the way down there, and then, well, you're not family. I was like, well, I'm pastor.
Maybe I just snuck in. I don't have any idea, but I did have some nursing home visits and stuff. At first, you couldn't get in, and then after a while, they would let you in. So I see good things happening. Church-wise, man, I don't know. With what I do, I'm like in a different church like every Sunday, and so it was strange that the different churches, when all this was going on, you would go into some churches, they'd take your temperature and make you wear a mask and social distancing and rows closed off where you could. Then you go into the next church, they'd be all hugging on one another, and it was just different depending upon what church you were in. I always carried the mask with me and wore it most of the time. But even now, you go into some churches now and they're still wearing masks. So I carry it with me when I go in and I see mask on, and I'll get mine and I'll put it on. But all of those things are starting to lessen. I think we're learning how to cope with it and just dealing with it and stuff. But I do like the approach of just listen, it's kind of like a bad weather policy. A lot of churches don't necessarily have bad weather. If you look outside and you see that the weather's bad, or there's ice on your driveway or your front porch or down your street, and you don't feel comfortable in going, well, stay home. That kind of a thing. But if we need to make an effort to keep the churches open, I believe. But if you are at risk, or there's some problems or something like that prevent you from going, well, don't feel guilty about it or something. Just make a wise decision for yourself. And
well, that's kind of what we did. We just said, hey, if you're sick, stay home. If you don't feel comfortable coming, stay home. That's like, watch us online. And so we just we're not going to shut down anymore. I'm going to go to number 9, and this is really kind of connected to coming out of the COVID thing, and this is members not returning. And I've talked to a number of pastors where that's been the case, and it was just, you kind of get it, because you're like, well, every church has the number of what I would call fringe members that, they'll come when it's easy, and they'll be here every so often kind of thing. We always call them the creasters, the Christmas and Easter crowd or whatever. But then you get those, they might be here once, maybe twice a month or something. But they come somewhat regularly. But then once COVID hit and the churches shut down, well, they just decided they'd stay home, and they never came back. And so I know every church has got a certain percentage of members that just never came back. And it's like, you can talk to them, and you can connect with them, and you can call them and be like, hey, we miss y'all, and oh yeah, we keep meaning to come, and 3 months later you're still calling them, and it's like, well, we keep meaning to come, and it's just that they're just not coming back. And so,
well, there's a few churches around here I think they're picking back up, and they're probably back to close to norm or whatever. And but for the most part, what I've noticed is that most of the churches have decreased, and you'll hear the pastors say something like, well, we're only about 60% of what we were before COVID or whatever. And that may be even an optimistic number. And I look at it sometimes, and it's maybe like about half of what it was before COVID, in which truly that may be their new norm. Don't compare it. Just pick up and go, and that sort of thing. But man, I don't know what the answers are to that. And of course, every church picked up and started doing online stuff, and that may be a good thing, or maybe not. I don't know. But even churches that had no online presence, once COVID hit, they at least, turned on their Facebook Live or something. Everybody did something. And even those churches who did have an online presence already, they just upped their game and got better cameras or better equipment and made it even better. And so a lot of changes have been made in that respect. And a lot of people are doing online and catching things whenever it's convenient for them. I don't have any idea, but whether that's right or wrong, man, I don't have any idea. But I'm looking at it, you're experiencing your new norm. You just take it from there and try to make something of it.
So, members not returning, number 9. Number 8 challenge facing pastors today is overwhelmed, just being overwhelmed with everything. And once again, like I said, all this kind of tied back in together, but I remember when you shut down for COVID, and all the pastors, of course, are going online, and it's like everybody I was talking to, and even I was seeing online pastors talking about it, it was like suddenly, even though you weren't having in-person services, you were doing more work than you were before, because then you're doing all this online stuff and trying to figure out how to do all this online stuff, and that just kind of compounded. But then it seems like now you're working twice as hard for half the results, and it seems like with the culture and everything that's going on in our culture in America, and with the politics, and like I said, all the stuff that's on this list, it just seems like everything comes kind of crashing in on the pastors. And I know I was reading an article the other week that was talking about in the last year, it's like 1 in 5 pastors have quit and resigned from their churches. It's just like the numbers are like horrendous of pastors that have quit just in the last year. In the evangelical churches. And so
I think there is a turnover. There is a turnover kind of taking place since all of that. And I don't know, maybe they are overwhelmed or dealing with the discouragement probably more than anything else. Yeah. But I know when I've gone out into the churches, even the church people, the church members, I will be there and I'll look out and I'm sitting there, I see somebody, And I'm thinking, well, the last time I saw that person, they were over here at this church over here.
Yeah.
Or I'll run into somebody else. And so I've noticed there's some people, they took this shutdown time or reopening or whatever it is, whatever spurred them on. But if they ever considered doing something else, they took that opportunity to do that. And so I've noticed a lot of times in these churches that, I'll run into somebody from Newkirk over in Blackwell or something, something like that. And so I think a lot of that kind of took place. And it hadn't happened here yet as far as like the pastors are concerned, but I've heard of there's a little bit of a turnover in the ministry as far as pastors and stuff, maybe coming out of it. They're dealing with the frustrations and the discouragement and, that whole things that they've had to work through here lately. And they look at it as maybe it's time for me to move on, maybe it's time to go or something like that. Luckily, in our area, the pastors have all kind of stayed put, at least for now. And that's a good sign and everything. So, but there is that kind of thing going on, just out of frustration and discouragement. There's a lot of people switching around.
Which, people that are not pastors don't get it, and I understand that. I wouldn't get it either if I wasn't in the inside, but I was like, being a pastor is an overwhelming job in the first place, but it's not physically demanding. I'm not like moving bricks or something, physical labor, but there is an emotional fatigue and a spiritual fatigue that sort of takes on, because you feel responsibility for these people, and then like we were talking about earlier, you see them doing stuff and you think you're reaching them, and then they go and do something stupid and you just want to whack them with a stick. You're like, come on, man. And it wears on you. It takes a toll. And then of course you're laboring in prayer, and you're putting your heart and soul into them. And then it's like, then they might turn on you on a drop of a dime, and then you're just like, you feel, and then of course people leave the church, and you can't, and you're like, well, you try not to take that personally, but of course you take it personally. Well, they left because of me, and so just all of that, just kind of, that's one of the bigger challenges I feel like for pastors in general, not just in this day and age, but in general, is just being overwhelmed by all of those things. Tying into that as well, number 7, a lack of prayer. I would think this is probably a problem for more pastors than they would probably admit. And I know, the lack of prayer has probably been a problem for me personally for most of my life, not just even in the ministry. I'm a independent guy, and I like to do things and do it myself. And I'll catch myself all the time like, okay, well, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, without ever actually going and talking to the Lord about it. And then, of course, it comes crashing down, and I'm like, oh, Lord, what did I do wrong? Oh, well, you didn't talk to me about it first. We get in this mentality of like, human effort. And, and we think, well, because, I'm doing ministry, it's like, oh, well, I'm doing this for the Lord. He'll approve. Well, maybe not. It kind of reminds me when Joshua and them, they just had this great battle and fought and defeated Jericho, and the walls fell down and all that. And then they go and attack Ai without asking God about it. And they get whooped, and he's like, oh, what did we do wrong? Oh, well, we forgot to ask the Lord. And so sometimes we do that in ministry, but I would say tying in with a little bit later on, we're going to talk about busyness and things, but I think you just get in this habit of doing stuff, and you're not spending enough time in prayer, which I think Christians in general, in our country especially, don't pray enough. And so,
well, I think all these things are connected together. The business, first of all, as far as all of the changes that have taken place the last couple of years, be encouraged, guys. It's not like I think things are turning around. I think we need to stop dwelling on a lot of that kind of stuff and start looking more toward the positive. I think we are primed and ready for some type of a spiritual awakening, some type of a revival, and I think it's doable. And I think the Lord is up to something. I don't think we should be in as much despair as what we are in. But man, if you're failing in your prayer, you're failing in every area of your ministry. Mm-hmm. And a lot of things that goes on is, these pastors, one thing I've noticed that all these pastors are busy. All these pastors are have their plates full, and it doesn't matter if they're full-time, part-time, bivocational, or whatever it is. These bivocational guys, they've got jobs and they work and they have family responsibilities plus their church and all of
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Those guys are just
Well, that's what
overwhelmed.
part-time is full-time, just part-time pay, right?
Yeah, but there's just so many things. Well, then even the part-time guys or something like that, I guarantee it. I pull up sometimes to see a pastor and he's out there mowing the grass, or I go in knocking on their door and they're in there vacuuming the floors and all of that kind of stuff. And so there may be different levels of busyness, but each one of these guys are just buried in a lot of things that have that shouldn't be priority. There should be someone else coming along helping them in those ministries and stuff. But even the full-time guys, maybe they're in a full-time position. It's a lot of administrative kind of work. They get buried under a lot of administrative kind of stuff. You'll go into a church sometimes to meet with the pastor, and so you're sitting out in the foyer waiting on him, and then somebody will come out. Then you're allowed to go in, get your 15 minutes or something.
Yeah.
And then when you leave, there's someone else sitting there waiting to get with him. And so their time is always strained, and
It's just a
everybody's
matter of
pulling
making it a priority.
Yeah, and so
it not just for pastors, but for every Christian.
I go to some churches
find
and
that
you'll hear
time.
the announcements, and like it'll be a Sunday, and they'll say, okay, 2 o'clock is this committee meeting, 3 o'clock is this committee meeting, 4 o'clock is this committee meeting, and then we have services, and after the service we have a deacons meeting, and all of that kind of stuff. And I'm saying, like, oh, good Lord, how do these guys do that all the time? But all of these pastors, it doesn't matter their status as far as like what size church or anything like that, they're just overwhelmed, buried under just a whole lot of busyness and things. And where we do start to suffer is in things, maybe some of our time with the Lord, prayer and things like that. You remember the story when they chose the first deacons in the book of Acts. The apostles, they say there's a disagreement in the church or something like that because the widows are not being tended to and all of that kind of thing. And so they pick men out from amongst them with the qualifications, and they set them aside for the work of the deacon. And it said for them, they would give themselves over to the work to labor in prayer and to labor in the word. And as pastors, that's our number one job. We are to labor, and it's a work. We are to labor in prayer and labor in the word. And but if you ask your church members, what's the pastor's responsibility? It may even be written out in some churches. This is the pastor's responsibility. Oh my gosh, it'll be like a scroll. Yeah. It'll roll out. Yeah. It'll hit the floor, roll down the aisle, out into the street, and everything else. There's a list a mile long of things that everybody thinks the pastor is responsible for, and this is his job, his priorities.
Well, we'll get to that in a couple of
There's sometimes listed out to you, but our number one priority is to labor in the word and to labor in prayer. And where we fail to do that, everything else begins to suffer and everything as well.
All right, number 6, trying to stay engaged, and I mean engaged with your membership in your church. And so once again, kind of piggybacking out of the whole COVID thing, just trying to stay connected to everybody seems to be more of a chore today than it used to be. Getting in touch with them, even if it's on the phone or if it's in, texting. If you can't visit in person, it's just trying to run everybody down, and it's really, everybody's just so darn busy all the time. It's really hard to connect with anybody. And then when you're here, they might be here on Sunday morning, and you've got this whole, service that you're doing, and you kind of wave and you hug them and you say, hey, and we'll see you next week, and that's about all the engagement that you get for an entire week. And of course, that's not really the way it's supposed to be in the Christian church. It's not the way it was in the first century. There was this living together kind of idea of doing ministry together throughout the week, not just on a Sunday morning. I remember talking about, you don't use the term splitting a Sunday school class, but growing a new Sunday school class out of this other class, and I got booed. Which it was like a cartoon. It was an older adult class, like senior adult class, and it had like 20 people in it. It's like, okay, well, we need to split this and make some new classes out of it so we can continue to grow. And I mean, they were like, one lady threw a pencil at me. I mean, it was ridiculous. And I was like, why is this a problem? And they're like, well, this is the only time we get to see these people.
Yeah, it's sacred
And I'm
ground.
like, why is that the case, that this is the only time you see them? You live next door to them, or in some cases. And so it's just, this idea that we're not engaged with one another in genuine Christian fellowship throughout the week. And it's not just as a pastor, but as a Christian, just trying to stay engaged with everyone and try to maintain that relationship with everyone is very, very difficult, not just in this day and age, but it seems to be in our culture, because American culture is very individualistic. I think it's funny because, I mean, you always watch those old 50s shows, Leave It to Beaver and that kind of stuff, and everybody knew their neighbors, and their neighbors would come over and borrow sugar and that kind of stuff. And I didn't live in the 50s. Maybe it wasn't actually like that. Maybe that's just an ideal on TV. But I barely know my neighbors because they don't want to talk to you. It's just no one's engaged with anyone in our culture really, unless you're already in that family and that friendship group. And so it just seems to be a hard thing to make sure you're connecting with everyone in the church. And so that's my number 6.
Well, I think some people are better at it than others. There's some pastors who are better at it than others.
Are you just saying I'm bad at it?
No, you're actually, it's the same kind of a thing with me. You got to kind of have a personable kind of nature or something to you. Some people are kind of more approachable than others. There's some that make themselves available more than others. I don't have a problem with you because you're calling me up and say, hey, could you come bail me out on my little podcast or something like that?
I did not say bail me out.
I'm a detriment to these things, let me tell you. But no, see, you reach out and engage me. It's the same way with what I do in the association. There's some pastors who will call upon me, use me, and things like that, and I'm easily available to them. And others are harder to find sometimes or get with. And you might see them, every so often, but there's not that feeling like I'm needed. But where I do feel like I'm needed, well, I'll be there and stuff. And so sometimes that same kind of a thing with the people of your church and stuff. I'm sure there's somebody out there cursing you. Well, he never comes by and sees me. He never calls me.
I'm sure there is.
Well, you know what? You reach out to the pastor. Maybe that'll make it open a door or something like that.
All right, the top 5. All right, number 5. According to me.
Okay.
The top 5 according to me. Challenges facing pastors today. Number 5. Overall busyness and time constraints. Like I said, this kind of ties back into the overwhelm and some of the ones that we've been talking about. I call it CEO mentality because, like you were just talking about a minute ago, and I said we were going to come back to that. A lot of churches seem to think that it's the pastor's job description, and sometimes it actually is written out in their job description that you are the head of every committee, and you're supposed to be the leader of the deacons, and you're supposed to come to every Sunday school class, and you're supposed to run every meeting, and you're in charge of having XYZ office hours, but you also have to visit 500 people a week, and you have to drive 5,000 miles, and you have to visit so many hospital and homebound, and it's like you've got all this stuff, and we've got this mentality of of course the pastor's responsibility is equipping the saints to do the ministry and laboring in the word and in prayer, as you said, but we get all this other stuff that just gets tacked on. And if we're not careful, a lot of the times that stuff ends up taking the priority. I was talking about the lack of prayer being an issue. I mean, there's plenty of times where I come into the office with the full intention of I'm going to go sit in the sanctuary in there and have my dedicated prayer time, but it's like, nope, I've already got 5 phone call messages and somebody waiting in the office for you, and then before you realize it, it's time to go home for the day, and you never got time to pray. And so just all these time constraints and busyness, and then of course you still get the jokes all the time, and then they're jokes, but they still kind of irk you. Well, it'd be nice to only work one day a week, right? You only work on Sundays. And I'm like, what you don't realize is Sunday is really an easy day for me because I've already done all the work throughout the week. And so
my favorite time of the week is Sunday night after everything's over. It's just this let down time, and you can just kind of start all over again.
Well, and they always talk about, Monday is like the depressing day because you've already, you're decompressing from everything. And if you're an introvert like I am, I love being around people, but it drains me. And so I like to have time by myself, to recharge.
I can't find any pastors on Mondays and Fridays. Mondays they're there, but it's their low energy day. So they do it for doing different things. But I don't know. I think this is kind of tied in with everything in a way. The busyness. Satan tries to occupy every second of your day, and with a lot of busyness. And it's not saying that it's not. Some things are not important, but it's like you say. Every committee they expect this, and you got to be ahead of that. Well, yeah, you need to be a part of it. You need to be engaged and in all of that kind of stuff, but maybe you need less committees, or maybe, we can be more efficient about some things that we do. But I do honestly think that we need to pursue the Lord. The reason why we're so busy is because our number one pursuit is supposed to be God. That's supposed to be every Christian, every believer's number one pursuit. But all of our time gets filled up with things, and they're not necessarily bad things, but they're not things that you should be doing or whatever. It's there's others. The ministry should be shared. It should be kind of spread out and things like that. And so our number one priority should be the pursuit of God. But when your calendar, your schedule gets filled up with all of this busyness, well, where's the time to pursue after God? The enemy's doing the same thing with our children. Everything takes away from our time with God, even being able to hear the voice of God, to be able to His direction. When our cell phones, text messages, right now, Satan, he wants to occupy every second of our day with just like a bunch of nothing. And every one of us could probably see how the young people, my wife complains, she's a school teacher, and she complains she can't even teach anymore because the kids are all so involved in their cell phones, and they have them on them all the time. And it's an extension of their person, and they're watching videos, playing games, TikTok, all that kind of stuff. And she said there's no time to teach because they're preoccupied in all these other kind of things. Well, we look at that and we can see that in our children, but we can't see the same thing in ourselves. Satan comes, all these things that have no eternal value to them whatsoever. And
good tie-in there. Talking about phones, number 4, social media. Social media, big challenge for pastors today. And I actually taught, it's not really preach, but I taught a lesson one time for an associational meeting to a bunch of older pastors about the importance of being on Facebook as a pastor. They did not agree with me, but my point was this, is like, all your church members, most all of your church members are on Facebook. I mean, even like some older members that you're like, this lady's 90 years old, she's on Facebook. It's not all of them, but a lot of them are. And you need to know what they're saying and what they're doing so that you can better minister to them. I've had, I like to use the word opportunity. I've had opportunity to be able to minister to a number of church members, past and present, for the things that they have said and done on Facebook. I had a married couple that had a marital spat in a public forum on Facebook, and then you had like all their friends were jumping in on sides in the comments. There's like 100 comments, and that's how I knew that there was a problem. And she had moved out and and gone to live with her parents and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I've got to like go, take care of this. And then you get my favorite. James talks about, out of the same mouth comes blessings and cursings. This should not be so. And you see it on Facebook all the time. It's like, oh, well, here's a quote from a Bible verse, and the very next passage there, or the very next post on Facebook, they're cursing out somebody to cut them off in the line or something. And you're like, this should not be so. And so social media, I think, is a big problem for pastors to deal with.
Yeah, I always kind of say, if you're going to be stupid, don't be so publicly stupid to where everybody can see it. But yeah, I used to be one of those type of guys that I thought Facebook was of the devil, and still may be. I don't, but I reluctantly.
I think it's a good tool if it's just how you use it.
I reluctantly, like kicking and screaming and everything else, finally did, because I try to post something worthwhile and everything, but churches have to these days. People, when they're looking up something about your church, they're not going to the yellow pages anymore and calling your church and asking what time Sunday school starts or anything like that. The first thing they do is they look up your website. And for the most part anymore, they don't even bother looking up the website. They just go to your Facebook page, and they'll do a lot of research. They'll listen to some of the pastor's messages. They'll look at some of the photos. They'll see some of the comments, and they'll get a feel for your church long time before they ever come actually pay you a personal visit. So yeah, you got to have some type of an online presence these days. And but I have a struggle with it. Myself. You can't live in it. You can't live on there or anything like that. But you got to be seen on there.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, just opportunity to be able to minister to people on there. And then, of course, now in the last year, with the polarization, I shall say, of politics, even more so than it had been in the past, you get all the political stuff on social media too. And then every church, you've got Democrats and Republicans in there. It's not like most churches are just all one thing. And then you get the church members bickering on Facebook over politics. And anyway, so social media, number 4. Number 3, coming to the top 3 now. Number 3, church just not being a priority. And like I said, all of these really kind of tie together. But I mean, just with the busyness and everything, I talked about pastor busyness, but I mean, just church member busyness in general. I was talking to somebody the other day about how many appointments. I have 3 children, and I was like, we had all dentist appointments, just getting dentist appointments for 3 children and yourself, and then you've got like a doctor's appointments, and then you've got this appointment over here, and then my kids are homeschooled, but then most of these kids have school activities and events that they're going to, and then you've got both parents working full-time jobs trying to get all this stuff going, and then sporting events and school activities and appointments and all this stuff. And I said, honestly, I'm impressed that anybody comes to church on Sunday morning, let alone any other time, because they've got so much junk going on. And so with all that being said, it just, church kind of gets shuffled to the background. Well, we've been gone all day. I've had this, every year in my ministry, you've always got those that are playing Little League sports or something like that. And it's like, well, we were in a baseball tournament all day on Saturday. We got back at midnight, and so we just slept in on Sunday morning. And you're like, okay, I mean, I get it, but then at some point, like prayer, you have to decide what's the priority, and is the priority going to be, sports, or is it going to be, church? Is it going to be God? And so, and I get it too, that I mean, a lot of churches, you're just going through the motions, and you're doing the rote sort of liturgy and whatnot. And I mean, when I say liturgy, I mean even in the Baptist church. I'm not just talking about like a Catholic or a Lutheran or something. I mean, even in the Baptist church, we have an order of service that doesn't change very much from week to week. You know when you go in there what you're getting, and so. I get it. It's like, well, or if the pastor's not going to be gone, that's my favorite. Well, the pastor's gone on vacation, so I'm not going to go to church this week because somebody else is preaching. And so, but it just, it seems like spiritual life and fellowship with the body of believers, especially when you got it online, it's like, well, we'll just stay home and watch it online. And so, like I said, all of these seem to connect together. It's just a lack of fellowship, a lack of engagement, and just not making it a priority.
Well, I think we're back to that whole thing again of the busyness and the priority kind of a thing. But there is what is that? Seek ye first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. All these things that kind of divert our attention. We got to get to that place where we're practicing self-denial again. Jesus says, in Matthew 16, if you're going to be my disciple, you have to deny yourself, take up the cross and follow me. And sadly, a lot of people they're not following the Lord. Most of your believers, most Christians, they think they've deceived themselves into thinking that they're a follower of Jesus, but they're a long way from following Jesus because we can't even get past that first step of self-denial.
Yeah.
We've got to deny ourselves some things. We got to start turning some things off. You do have to kind of prioritize. If I've got to have time and prayer and fellowship with the Lord and all of that, well, you're going to have to make that a priority. And that may mean that you're going to have to sacrifice some of these other things in your life. And those other things attribute to all the busyness that's in your life. And so we got to get back to some self-denial kind of things where, and I'm not even saying making church the priority in your life anymore. I'm just saying make the Lord the priority in your life and see where that takes you for a while. And I understand, sometimes you got to miss church and, that kind of thing. And, you got that sort of thing's just going to happen for whatever reasons. But I think where we're messing up is, once again, that pursuit of God, that pursuing after Him. He's got to take priority in our life. And in order for that to happen, we have to practice a little self-denial and a little sacrificial living. And that's where the real rewards and everything are going to come to us. But it's not just the church not being a priority. Yeah. It's the Lord not being a priority.
All right. Number 2, and really for me, I went back and forth on these. Number 1 and number 2 are kind of interchangeable for me. I couldn't decide which one I really wanted to kind of put at the top of the list. But number 2, as it stands right now for me, is biblical illiteracy. And what I mean by that is people don't know the Bible. They don't know the basic stories of the Bible. And even worse to me than that is they don't seem to want to know the Bible. Because I was like, I can fix illiteracy. I can teach you. That's the whole point. That's why I'm here. But I was like, they don't seem to care. They don't want to know. They would rather get it in, you used to have these things called the Cliff Notes. You remember those back in the day? Now you just have the internet. But, they used to have Cliff Notes they would sell, and it was like an abbreviated summary of a book. And so people would cheat in school and read the Cliff Notes and write their book reports off the Cliff Notes. Well, you kind of have that today with the Bible, except, you have it either in media. So you watched a movie one time of the 10 Commandments with Charlton Heston and you think you know what the book of Exodus is about. Or they have like The Chosen, I think is a thing out now, or they have like the Bible series that was out on, I don't know, it was like History Channel or something there, which was, and I mean, I love that they do these biblical like shows and stuff like that, but most of the time they're taking a lot of artistic liberties with things and not really biblical. But then even beyond that, you have social media, and like I was talking about earlier, they would post like Bible verses. Well, people take Bible verses out of context and post it up there, and it's like people are getting their theology from little tweets or Facebook posts instead of actually reading the context of the Bible. They don't even know how to read the Bible effectively anymore. And so it seems like the older generations, maybe because they went to Sunday school faithfully, do. But I mean, even in the church, I'm not even talking outside the church. In the church, young adults my age and younger seem to be completely ignorant of what's actually in the Bible. And so when you're preaching, it's a challenge for pastors when you're preaching and you're like, oh, well, like when David and Goliath, and you look out in the congregation and everybody's like, what? And you're like, how do you not know a basic story like Noah and the flood or David and Goliath? And they just don't know. And so it's a challenge. I mean, it's an opportunity because you get the chance to teach them, but it's also a challenge because you're having to it feels like you're having to build from ground zero a lot of the time with a lot of people.
Yeah, what's those passages when Paul says, I have desire to feed you meat,
but you're still needing milk.
You're still needing milk.
Yep.
And by this time you should already be teaching this stuff and things.
Yeah, people have been Christians
or is that in Hebrews?
It's in Hebrews, it's in Hebrews.
And but yeah, you think about stuff. But then again, there's that dilemma. It's where is your pursuits? Here's something I've discovered is that anymore, when someone asks me a question, they're not seriously looking for an answer. Very seldom do someone ask me a question and they're seriously wanting an answer. Most of the time, what it is they've done like a 5-minute Google search, and they've become an expert on like any given topic. And so when they come to the pastor and they ask him a question, the whole intent is to try to trip them up on something, or to try to it's a prideful kind of a thing, or they try to impress you with their Bible knowledge. It doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. They've looked it up and they've landed on something, and so they even come to you and they ask you a question. And I've got to the point to where what I do is I don't answer the question, because what you do is you'll say, they'll ask you some question that, and I'll say, well, I don't know, what do you think about that? And then they'll spill their can. They'll unload everything they've known on it, and then you take what they've thrown out, and then you try to maybe correct some things or answer some things or something like that. But no, the illiteracy, no one reads the Bible anymore. No one. There's very few people who have actually sat down and read the Bible from cover to cover, or even their New Testament from the front to the end. And so there's a lot of gaps. There's big gaps in people's thinking. But everybody has the little things that they specialize in. They prioritize, and they've developed little theologies around there, whether it's right or wrong or anything. But
well, exactly. And of course, this leads to where you have, even in the church, you have things like that. To me, at least, in my personal opinion, should not even be debatable in the church. Things like homosexuality or transgenderism or abortion, to me, the Bible is already settled on all these things. There's not even any debate about these things. I mean, it's very clearly spelled out. But then you have Christians in the church that want to debate these things, and it's because they don't know the Bible.
And they'll say, well, didn't God forgive everything? Jesus died for all of our sins? Well, yes. But you're going to have to confess it as being sin.
Yeah, go read the book of Romans when he says, should we sin more so the grace should abound more? No.
So, I hear you. And but, it is kind of a aggravating, kind of a discouraging thing. But I don't know. We got to have that hunger for the Word, and we have to have that desire to learn. Most people anymore, you can't teach someone who doesn't want to learn anything, and you can't teach people who think they already know everything. And sadly, these days, most people don't even trust their pastors to interpret for them, because they got all these other resources that they go through.
That's a good point, actually. Yeah, well, John MacArthur said this. Well, John MacArthur's a real great guy, but he's not right about everything.
Yeah. So, well, good for him.
But but anyway, no, and we'll just leave it with that. All right, number one. That was my drum roll. Number one that I put on my list is Christian nationalism, and some of you are probably like, "What is that?" And you were probably like, "What is that?" Christian nationalism is this idea that America, number one, first and foremost, is a Christian nation, and I'll define what I mean by that, and that America has a special destiny from God as a Christian nation to rule as a Christian nation over the world. All right, and so this manifests itself in a lot of ways. The reason I put it at the top of my list is because it's really come to the forefront in the last couple of years, primarily due to former President Donald Trump and the evangelical connection and reaction to Donald Trump's presidency. Donald Trump was brought in and did a lot of great things for religious freedom and for pro-life. He's probably the most, as far as signing laws, the most advocate one to sign pro-life laws into effect. But there were a lot of Christians that latched onto him like he's some kind of Messiah, like he's the like Jesus come again. And it really, and all this kind of connected, and then that in turn connected the Republican Party to evangelical Christianity, which I got to tell you guys is a problem for a multitude of reasons. But I'm going to tell you, it's already going to come back to bite us in the tail, because no one is going to want to listen to the gospel of Jesus Christ from a Christian, because they're going to be like, "Didn't you vote for Trump?" And it's become a hindrance because we've hitched our wagon to this idea. And the problem with all of this is like America is not the new Israel. I've heard that before, that this is the new Israel. We are the chosen race, the chosen nation of God. No, America is a great nation. It's one of the probably the greatest nation, I believe, in the world as far as human values go. I mean, democracy is great. Capitalism is probably, in a fallen worldly system, is probably the best economic system possible in this fallen world. And I mean, I think our justice system is probably, as flawed as it is still better than. I'm not harping against America at all. But what I want people to understand is that the church is not a national entity, it's a global entity, and God is not the God over America only. God is the God of the nations, and God will bless America, yes, but God will bless Iraq. God will bless China. God will bless these other nations as well, and we have brothers and sisters in all of these nations, and the church transcends geographical lines. And so our allegiance and our loyalties first and foremost has to be to the kingdom of God and his church, his global church. And so I am proud to say I am a Christian first and an American a distant second. And there's a lot, and the reason why I think this is a challenge for a lot of pastors and a lot of churches is because you have, and it goes back to the Facebook and the social media and the politics that are in the bickering that's going on within the churches, is because we get this idea that if you're Republican and you vote for Donald Trump or whatever, then you're a good Christian, and that's just not simply the case. The politics it's a hard thing to discuss, first and foremost. They always joke that you don't talk about religion and politics, and now we've melded religion and politics into one topic. But, being Republican and being Democrat is not what it means to be. I preached a sermon on this one time, and I said in that sermon that you should have, if I'm a Republican, I'm a diehard, staunch Republican, I should have more in common with my fellow brother in Christ who is a diehard Democrat than I do with other Republicans that are not Christians. And that blows people's minds.
I think if you follow Christ, you're going to be hated by all.
Yeah.
And even other Christians.
Yeah, we don't talk about that much.
I don't know. No, as here's the deal. We are blessed. We are a blessed nation. We are a blessed people. And God has had his hand upon this nation for generations now. And it saddens us to see the direction that everything is going. Personally, when it comes for me to vote or anything, I will vote for the person that best represents my Christian values. There's no way on earth I'm going to vote for someone who advocates for abortion, homosexual marriage, all that kind of stuff. And people will look at me and say, well, you're just a one-issue voter. And I'll say, yes. And for the most part, on that one issue of abortion, I can pretty much tell where that individual is going to stand on all the other issues and things as well. And you can't get mad at me. You look at homosexuals or LGBTQ community; they will vote in unison. They're just one big massive vote for the candidate that supports their causes. They know who butters their bread. Well, they're in reality they're smarter than us. they're smarter than most Christians. At least they know that much, And so sometimes we got to look past the personalities and things like that. And I know you hear people that say, the never Trumpers and all that kind of stuff. Man, it's not Trump, know. But
Trump's not a great guy. He does some stupid things and he says some stupid things.
But you got to look at the choices. And here's the thing: what's the Ephesians 5:10 or what is it? That we shall stand before the judgment seat of Christ and give an account of what we've done in the flesh, whether it be good or bad. And that includes your vote. I guarantee it. And you're going to stand before the Lord, and He's going to say, "How could you have voted for all those baby killers? How could you have done that?" Well, I don't want to have to answer for the blood of that. Now, if my conscience tells me that I can't vote for a particular person, I'm not going to vote for the abortionist or anything like that. or the one who's going to put those abortion judges in place or anything like that. I can't do that. If my conscience tells me I can't vote for the other guy, well, then I don't vote.
Yeah.
You know, but I'm looking beyond the individual. I don't have to preach Republican in the church. I just have to hit the issues. I've got to talk about the life, the abortion, and the political issues that are coming up. And I can, you just have to trust the believer to go and judge themselves. They have the freedom to vote for whoever they want.
Well, and that's what I said. Don't get hung up on the parties, because I mean it is more polarized than it used to be. But I mean, you used to have more moderate Democrats and more liberal Republicans, and now it seems to be more polarized in the last decade or so. But it's not about political parties. It's about the candidate. It's about what they stand for and what they say they're going to do. And I mean, you can, even the Republicans, you can vote Republican, but it's like, how much of, we've had several Republican presidents in the last couple of decades. What did they do about the issue of abortion and these other things? And so, it's like you said, you've got to vote your conscience. And if you can't vote for either one of the guys, then, vote third party or vote nothing. But anyway, bringing it back full circle, this whole idea that, I don't know how I'm trying to put this. Just this idea that, like, to be a good Christian, you have to be a good American. That's not really the case, because especially now in this day and age, we're really, as Christians, starting to buck against the culture that we're in America, and America's pushing back. And so, America, to a certain extent, and the culture that we're in right now is the enemy. And, yes, God bless America. I'm proud to be an American, all that kind of stuff. But at the same token, that same America is going to be against the values of Christ. And so you have to balance that. And you have to remember that my allegiance is to Christ and his kingdom first, not to America, because this nation is going to pass away like all the other nations. His kingdom will last forever. And so like I said, it's just, to me, is kind of a bigger challenge because of all the politics and the things that go on in the churches today.
Well, during the last election cycle, it was a very big challenge in the churches because of the thing. But then again, here we're playing into biblical ignorance, and like
I said, all these seem to be interconnected,
and all that kind of stuff. But it was a consuming thing in the church for the long time, and still kind of is. I mean, you're going to have political views, and I don't know if we necessarily maybe we need to have a minister of politics in our church. No,
we already have plenty of self-designated ministers of politics.
Just to kind of straighten us out on the issues or something like that, more than anything.
Well, and that's what I like. I like to print out those like voter guides. There's always like those Christian sites that'll put out, okay, here's where they stand on these issues, because sometimes that kind of gets lost in all the drama and the theatrics and the fight ads and whatever. But
one of the blessings
just come down to what do they stand for? Let's vote for that platform that we think fits with what God would want us to vote for. And so
one of the blessings about living in this country is that we do still have the freedoms to meet and to speak and to do things, and we're losing a lot of that. We're losing a lot of those kind of things, but you're still living in the best country there is.
That is true. All right. Well, God bless America then. We'll end on a patriotic note, and we'll see you guys next time. Have a good week.